Hello and good afternoon, everybody. 5 p.m. It's time for Into the Absurd. I'm Tina Brock, your host for today. And on behalf of Erica Holscher and Bob Schmidt, who are flying the plane today here in ITA land, we thank you so much for taking time out of this beautiful day to be here with us. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for being with us. If you're coming in on Facebook Live, join us there. Put your questions in the chat box and as well on Zoom. Today, we're going to be talking with Julia Levitina. Julia is a sculptor. She creates beautiful and powerful figures in bronze, and we're going to talk to her about her work, her show at the Stannah Gallery, and her many side and important parts of her life that are equally fascinating, being a pilot, being a figure skater, and the way in which all of that comes together, and her work. I'm in her studio today here virtually, which is going to be the setting for our conversation. So thanks for being here. Put your questions in on Zoom, and let's get Julia to the dinner table right now. Julia Levitina, welcome to Into the Absurd. I think we'll get Julia to the dinner table there. Oh no, we lost her. Okay, Bob's given me the signal that we lost Julia, so we'll get her back. And in the meantime, just talk a little bit about what's been going on here at the IRC before we talked to, I was talking to Bob and Erica about the ways in which we're going to be coming back out on the stage. And while we don't quite yet have a date for that, 2021 is the time when we hope we're going to be able to be there. And we're looking at all different kinds of ways and means of existential authors that you've come to know and love for the IRC. Samuel Beckett, and we've got Enda Walsh, who was on the table with us, the new electric ballroom earlier in the year. So those are some of the things that we're thinking and looking at, but we have to sort of sit back and see what capacity is going to be like and what venues are going to be available. And that's a lot of what we're going to be looking at in the year to come. So all that is coming up in the year ahead, and hope that you are managing to get through. And oh, hey, Jesse Delaney, thanks so much for putting that question in the chat today while we get Julia back. Have we considered a read ahead reading or book club? I don't know. I think that would be something in a sort of a way that we could take into the absurd. I know that in the weekly, when we're sending out our weekly emails and sort of putting in a lot of information about the guests, and as you guys know who have been on the show with us since the beginning, we do a lot of research and provide a lot of research and links and photos for the guests who are, going to be coming up on the show. And I often think that the 50-minute conversation that we have on here is just a small part of what we really could dig into. And I've often thought that a book club, having authors on, or just having guests come in, or having the audience come in and talk, would be interesting. And we could use, existentialist authors. We could use plays, do the play, read the play, and then come back on and be able to have more conversation, because really the talk back is the part of the show that can often, when we're live and we're on the stage, we often want to have talkbacks, and those are the parts where the audience really gets to kind of get into their perception of the show, what's happening for them, what it meant to them, what the design elements meant to them, how they spoke to them. And yet somehow it can become difficult to do those for a small theater company where you've got actors that are working and that are moving on to things after the show in the evening, a 2 or 3 hour show. So sometimes that becomes a little challenging. One of the things that we found with doing Into the Absurd is it really kind of provides this other option, this other place, this other way of coming into the work that is unusual, I think, and not always possible when you're doing the work live on stage. So thank you for that, Jesse. I don't know, that's something that we definitely will consider. And I think the different ways in which the virtual medium can be used is something that we're looking at as well. Certainly, a lot of companies have realized and have been using the option of, thinking about rehearsal, thinking about auditioning, and the many ways in which this format can be used to kind of streamline and be more efficient in the ways in which we move ahead. And I'm very, very excited to be, John Zach's going to be on the show in June, and we're going to talk a little bit about Tennessee Williams' two character play, which was on the table for us before we went out, during the pandemic. And also, Peggy Meekum is going to come on and we'll talk about, she's going to be directing New Electric Ballroom for us, which is the Enda Walsh play, and the ways in which the virtual world, while we won't be doing those shows virtually, the ways in which we can get together and we can make theater happen, and the many different ways in which we get together to make theater happen can happen outside of there. I'm going to check in. Bob, give me a heads up here about Julia, and if we can get her back on. I'm going to check right here, and this is a conversation that we might have to extend to another time, folks, if we can't get Julia back on. But Bob, oh, thank you, Jesse. I know, yeah. Well, this is a first for us, where we've actually, in all this time over the course of the last year, since June, we've had some really good connections, good luck, and our ability to sort of, make it all come together. And we've met some really interesting people over that time. There's something like 40 conversations that we have had now with, as you well know, authors and writers. And for the longest time, we weren't doing so many actors and directors, because there was a period of time there where it was just very hard. There she is, hooray, hooray. I've just been totally tap dancing and with the help of our lovely audience member, Jesse Delaney, who's sort of like feeding me questions, and it's the stand-up curtain speech that will never die. So thanks for being on, Julia Levitina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're there. And I'm glad to know that these things happen and we get reconnected and life goes on. So I want to focus on so many questions for you. Your life growing up in the Ukraine, in Odessa, and wondering how your childhood was shaped by art and the kinds of influences as a child that might have led you to want to go into bronze sculpting.
Right, that's a big question.
It's big.
Yeah, I guess well, for one, I always knew and felt that I was an artist. I almost feel like I was an artist before I was born, and I'm not even sure why or where that came from, but one of my earliest memories is getting up in my crib and drawing on the wallpaper that we had. That somebody made a mistake of giving markers for some birthday or holiday or something like that, and they were left within my reach. And I remember getting up early in the morning and just going to town on the wallpaper that my parents later discovered when they woke up. I guess another incident was we had this piano, and it's kind of sad. I remember it from my childhood, and when I think about it, I'm like, I'm surprised it didn't kill me right then and there. But it wasn't a lacquered piano; it was just a kind of a matte piano.
Mhm.
It was an old piano called Odessa, coincidentally, and I carved into it. It was a kitchen knife, yeah, because there was this area that I felt was suitable for a little carving exercise. And I had some kind of a very primitive relief going in it. Like I said, I don't know how I got away with that. But those two memories were when I was very small. And then I've always wanted to be an artist. I've always wanted to draw. My father's an engineer.
Mm.
And he has a beautiful handwriting, and he used to draw very well. So he would draw me things. And then I guess just the lack of, there was no technology or anything to speak of. We didn't even get a television set till I was maybe 5 years old, and we had to mortgage it out. So we had to find a way to entertain ourselves. And I used to make various paper notebooks and cut out these paper dolls and then make dresses for them and glue that on, stick them into different environments. So all of that was just very basic, I guess, child entertainment. And yeah, so that's just been always pervasive. I was always drawing, I was always sketching, I was always making something with my hands, helping my dad fix stuff.
Well, so it seems just extraordinary how you go from the drawing of the figure to to what I'm sitting in front of. I'm in your studio. Where is this studio, by the way, that I'm in today?
That you're in today. I know.
Yeah.
I would have been there as well. The connection is just not very good at the studio, so I thought I'd be better off at home.
Yeah.
With the internet. But that studio's in Paulsboro, New Jersey. I know anytime anybody hears New Jersey, they think it's like ways away. It's only 20 minutes over one of the bridges off of 295. It's an industrial park that has a number of units. I share my studio with my colleague and friend, who's also a sculptor who works in concrete. And we've collaborated together on various projects since the academy, where we met. So yeah, it's part of an industrial park. It's an industrial unit. It's not for the faint of heart. It doesn't have heat or air conditioning except for in a very small space. And we're well equipped with all kinds of things because I do all my own metal finishing. I have a welder and an air compressor and associated tools. We make molds in that space. I make waxes in another designated space. We have all kinds of saws to build things. So it's pretty hardcore. Very dusty also.
How do you decide what is the impulse or the spark for what you're going to create? Is it, do you see something? Do you see a person? Do you see an event and that's sparked in your mind and then you want to recreate that? Or what is that germ that leads you to produce, to come up with a specific figure or, the people?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think that as an artist, and you know that as well, you never really stop working, right? So you're kind of always thinking about whatever it is you're working on or whatever you might be working on in the future. So I think when I'm looking at things, when I'm experiencing events, I'm always aware of how it can be said in a sculpture. So it's hard to kind of pinpoint whether it's a singular event. As you know, I'm involved in more art than one. So sometimes, I'll write a song and later adopt the title to a sculpture. It's definitely seen. I sketch all the time. So I draw all the time. For me, it's almost kind of like thinking. So I'll sketch, if I'm on public trans, or I'll sketch if I'm at the zoo, or if I'm just sitting around. Sometimes it is an idea wanting to say something in particular and trying to think through how it can be said and why it's important for me to say it. Sometimes it's a movement of something. In the case of the sculpture that's behind you, that was a commission. So that was a specific topic that was given to me by the commissioning client. So in that way, it's a little bit more contrived, if you will, but the theme then is given. Sometimes it just develop. Sometimes there are ideas or thoughts that sit around my studio and kind of like half articulated form, and sometimes I just can't figure out what I'm trying to say or how or why. But then sometimes you walk in and there it is, it clicks because you have had experience or something that does kind of spark it. So I think it's probably intuitive more than anything else. And I think that intuition is just honed by constant practice of observing and thinking about it and thinking sculpturally.
So the drawings on the wall over on that are in the room that I'm in your studio.
Okay.
Are those the drawings are they the drawings for another sculpture, or are they related to the one behind me?
Those are actually just anatomical drawings. They're not my anatomical. The one behind the anatomical drawings was actually an armature that I was scaling up for another sculpture that was commissioned by someone in Haverford for their garden. And that's called an écorché, and it's just a flayed anatomical representation of a male figure. So the reason it's hanging there is because when I was working on Saint Joseph, who's behind you, whenever I needed to reference anatomy, so there's a body underneath, right? And it's important for me as a figurative sculptor to have the sculpture feel like there's a body underneath, even though there's a lot of drapery on that figure because it's a period piece. And then, when I need to reference arms or legs, and the same when I have a model coming in and posing, not everything is evident in a human figure, depending on how the person's kind of masses are distributed and how fit they are and what kind of fitness they do, because I do work from live models all the time, whether animal or human, and there are nude models that come in and pose for me, so it's handy to have that reference. It's just a reference for any human figure, really, because there's a lot going on anatomically, and for it to feel like it's a real person, it's important to understand what's going on underneath, because you're using the body to express something.
If you have a live model with you, are you instructing them at all on their emotion or their expression while they are there? Or is it more used for anatomical purposes to just make sure that aspect is?
I think in the end it ends up being a combination always. I usually sculpt from the model as a reference more than as a copy, unless I'm doing an exercise and I just want to sculpt a male figure in a specific pose, or sometimes I'll have them come in because I'm working on the piece and I can't quite figure out how a knee is articulated in a certain position. So I'm not so reliant on the model that I need for them to take a certain psychological expression for me to then be able to copy it. So again, that piece behind you was a composite of a whole bunch of different models. So it's not like I found, a guy and a baby who looked a certain way. I referenced, like a friend's hair and nose because I thought it would be appropriate. So I just it was a conglomeration of different characteristics of different people. But I guess my work doesn't call for me to be that literal unless I'm doing an exercise. And if I'm doing an exercise, it's usually, the pose usually speaks to a certain emotion, and then the portrait just supports that emotion. Because then you have to stand for quite a bit.
Yeah. Do you get attached to some pieces more than others?
I try not to get attached to them intentionally, because getting attached sometimes leads you on the wrong path. Like you fall in love with a moment and then you're working the entire piece to preserve that moment, which might not be congruent with something else in the sculpture. So I won't, if I'm not, the sculptures have something to say. And unless I have expressed that to my satisfaction in the finished piece, nobody's ever going to see it until I arrive at that point. And so I don't know if in that sense it's an attachment. I think in that sense it's a finished sentiment that I'm ready to put out in the world. And then sometimes you do get hung up and I really love this detail. It doesn't work with anything else. So sometimes I'll sketch it separately, or I'll just start a new piece altogether if I'm that attached to that thing. But most of the times I'm not. I just grab it, and it's clay, so it's malleable. It's not like it's open heart surgery or anything like that. It's not even stone carving where you have to work a certain way or you risk losing the entire piece. This is clay. It moves around. So I'm typically pretty aggressive with it. And it's a release not to be attached. So I've practiced non-attachment in that way intentionally, because it would hold me back.
How do sculptors become known for their work? And well, that's not the proper way of asking the question, but
I was going to say, I don't think you got the right person.
Yeah, no, well, but how, is there a specific thing that you do as a sculptor that you feel like you do really well and perhaps differently? How would I identify a Julia sculpture?
Come to the show.
But is there a trait? Do you have would I be able to pull, or do you would I be able to pull a sculpture out of a lineup and say, this is a Julia sculpture?
I think if you're familiar with my work and familiar with my touch, and so I mean, we can take a great example, somebody like Auguste Rodin, and there were a lot of people who imitated him, and he kind of like kicked off an entire tradition in sculpture. But you could probably pick out his work out of a lineup, even of people who are his kind of imitators. And I think it's kind of like handwriting, even if a whole number of people and myself are tackling the figure or tackling the animals, you can still, like, you're writing, maybe you're copying the same text, but different people will have different handwriting. And if a specific handwriting appeals to you for a certain number of reasons, you will pick it out, even if 10 people have the cursive going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, I try to kind of find extraordinary in the ordinary is how I like to think of what I'm trying to do was my work. So I definitely hope that sentiment comes across. And then you're kind of like, you think you've created something meaningful, and then something that appeals to people might be something completely different. So that happened to me before. Like, I had these plain rabbits that I really enjoyed working on, and they just kind of threw up with a lot of joy. And it's the two of them, and bronze allows me to do all kinds of things of suspending things, more or less in the air on very small supports. So they're kind of levitating. And that piece has been really popular, actually sold out of all editions. And I think that a lot of people out there identify me with those rabbits. Even though, of all the work that I've created, I don't know that, that's in my mind, my legacy. But I think that in somebody's mind, it might be.
Well, do you think it's because of what are the elements? The playfulness of it, the sort of uniqueness of it,
I think so. I think it's probably the joy of it that comes.
Yeah.
Across. And I think it depends too. Like, there's a piece in this current show that's been really popular, surprisingly popular, called Gathering. And it's actually a whole bunch of stacked animals on top of one another. And to me, initially, when I started exploring the theme, I looked into Mexican folk art that is whimsical and beautiful. And obviously, I kind of identify more with the classical tradition. So folk art is something I absolutely love, but that's not kind of how I work. So I try to incorporate some of those elements into my own work, and develop this piece as a kind of a reflection on all the different attributes that a single person might have, all the different personality quirks. And you're, like really stubborn in one aspect and really fragile in another, and really strong in that. So it's interesting. It's almost like there's like a bubble, and there are all these qualities in a single bubble that make up for the kind of person that you are and the kind of personality that you have. So I was thinking about that initially. And then a lot of the kind of social movements happened, and there was a lot of discussion about kind of racism and different ethnic and racial groups and separations and stuff. And it's, there's a bear on the bottom and the deer on top, and then there's a fox, a rabbit, bird. So animals that don't necessarily get along together, right? Like a fox and a rabbit are all kind of, they make up for like a tower of like a totem of animals that is self-supporting. So I was like, okay, I can see how that can infuse that piece. And then the isolation associated with COVID and all these beings coming together, these critters coming together, also in the single tower. And I called it Gathering. So I think that piece appeals for a whole slew of reasons, but I think not the least of them being the reality that we're living in, and that warmth of, being huddled with someone, you care about, which is having the physical contact with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the pieces, they have a very personal meaning for me, but then once they become part of the world, I don't even always like talking about them, because I don't want my perception to infuse somebody else's. And I think when the piece is, acquired, or whatever you want to measure the success of the piece, is when somebody sees it and they're able to bring their life experiences and somehow there's a relationship with mine, or they wouldn't be able to relate to it. But at the same time, they bring their own perception to it, and then it acquires that different life that's independent of me and
Mhm.
continues to kind of do its job in the world.
You have a friend there with you, your cat.
Yes. Oh, she participates
I
in.
just love that you just almost, it was an entrance on cue. You began talking about the animals and
Yeah, she
became your job.
participates, and she's like the expert
Yeah.
video uh,
Do,
person.
do you feel when you're working, like say when you're working on the rabbit piece and you described it as feeling joyful, is are you aware of your emotional state when you're working on various pieces?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think the clay just captures that. You
Hmm.
know, we've done, Beck was one of the academy instructors. He had us do an exercise of just making a bunch of boxes out of clay and infusing it with emotion. So you'd make like the angry box and the quiet box, and clay is so valuable, and it absolutely communicates whatever you're feeling.
And so then if you sort of get stuck or if you're hitting whatever the block is, what do you do?
It depends. I usually have a number of things going at once. Um, because I also do craft work for myself and for other people. So I have to, I'm almost forced to split my time a lot of the times. So when I get just pure sculpting time, it's pretty precious. And I think, it's kind of like what Rodin said, and I took it to heart and it stays with me. And he said something about how inspiration is just a bunch of crap. It's hard work that counts. And now and again, the sky opens up and it comes. So it's a studio practice. It's a job.
Mhm.
I work at it, and then there are these moments of awe when the piece starts sculpting itself. And sometimes there is that back and forth because I'm trying to force something onto it that it doesn't want, and it is a dialogue. And there's this great book that I also love that has influenced me a lot in how I think about my work, and it's called Zen and the Art of Archery by
Yeah.
Nagel. And very, very much, I mean, he talks about so he's taking archery class in Japan in order to understand Zen Buddhism. And his teacher is telling him, you have to just keep practicing, keep drawing the bow, keep drawing the bow, keep drawing the bow until the shot falls from you. And he relates it to like a drop of rain on the bamboo leaf, and the leaf just kind of keeps on bending under the weight of the water until that drop just falls to the ground effortlessly. So that's how I think of it. And when it finally does, it's almost independent from me. So I
Mhm.
can't take credit for it. It does feel as if like, there's something larger that happens, and I'm grateful to be a kind of a vehicle for it.
A vessel for that.
Yeah.
So I imagine, during this last year, you talked about your studio not being heated and whatnot, and yet um, you were able to go and you were able to sculpt and work during that time, which must have been, which must have been, well, how was that for you during this time? A gift, I imagine.
It was very difficult,
Was
actually.
it?
And it's funny because, right, an artist, as a sculptor, like I work by myself a lot. In fact, I work by myself most of the times. So you would think, like, oh, isolation, no big deal, good. All the social commitments are gone. But it was a different kind of isolation. And a lot of the things that I enjoy doing that contribute to my art, like playing music, I write songs, I play out, I coach skating, and it seems like it's like all these wildly different things, but I don't see them that way. I see them as a whole. I see them as a continuous process of my art. And I believe that people that I admire, like Michelangelo or like a lot of early 20th century artists, they saw that interdisciplinary aspect to the arts. So they mingled with other arts. They were constantly engaged with different kinds of artists and writers and musicians and actors and performers. And I think that enriches your art in a lot of ways. So I think all these other things that I do enrich my art, and I bring it to the studio, and I'm able to have that much richer of an expression because of those things. And all of a sudden they were all gone. What was remaining is a very deep financial concern, just about pure survival. Because something like skating and music were kind of nice side gigs that paid for the groceries, and that was gone. And then obviously nobody's going to run out to buy art. It is, as a bronze sculptor, it's a luxury thing. It is a three-dimensional thing. It's an expensive thing that is always a harder sell than something like paintings. So all of that time that I would spend cultivating myself in all these different ways as an artist was spent, researching grants and various funds and sending out applications and trying to figure out whether or not they were going to make the unemployment work for us gig workers.
Yeah.
So all of that was very stressful. The uncertainty of it was very stressful. I was scheduled to teach in Europe and France in particular, a number of workshops, and you kind of spread it out and you count on those things, and all of a sudden that was all gone. My family is obviously in Europe. I haven't seen them in a year and a half. I have a lot of concerns for that. My parents were in New York. My dad was working. It was a very difficult time. It was very difficult to come into the studio and focus because there were the curfews. I wasn't sure if they were going to close the bridge right between Jersey and Philadelphia. So I was trying to knock out all the kind of craft metalwork that I had in my studio. So it was a real effort, because I've heard that I was like, oh, artists, you guys must have had a great time, ability to, and it's like, maybe I don't work from angst either. I think I work best when I am at peace with myself and I'm happy, at least to some degree. So having just so much kind of barraging in my mind was really, really hard to shut it out. And so the show that I've produced over the past year and a half, to me, is a kind of a triumph of sorts, because I was able to kind of rise above, and it was purely through just discipline and just going in. It's like, I'm going to go in, even if I accomplish nothing, at least I went in and I did something. So it was just kind of trying to keep that momentum to just say.
We were talking before the show about you're getting your pilot's license and how that how important that was, and I wonder if you can talk a little about what that experience was like during this time, being able to just fly.
Right. Yeah, and that was definitely one of the things that just miraculously, in a way, came into my life through a number of unrelated events, through my art, as a matter of fact. And that's another thing, is that my art has brought me to some incredible places, and the sky being one of them. And I think that's also kind of like thinking about, well, how do I draw inspiration? How does it work? I think when it's real, it leads you to places. It's a kind of a place. It's not a person. It's something bigger than me. And when it comes full circle like that, I'm like, okay, I'm on the right track here. So I actually wrote a song called Apricot Sky that was inspired by the Wright brothers, and aviation airspace has been always something I've been always interested in. And in the back of my mind, I was kind of like, maybe I can find a way of merging the two together somehow. So I wrote the song, and my bass player was friends with a guy who they grew up together with and learned to fly kind of early. And this friend, Jeff, went on to be an airline pilot. He flies for American. So my bass player, Josh, was like, I have this friend, and I needed a photo shoot. It was an airplane for the record release of World Cafe Live in 2018 or 2017. I don't remember. So in BC, before the pandemic. So we went out to Morgantown Airport, took some photos for that song. It's up on wherever the digital music is available. And then Jeff took me up in that airplane, let me have the controls, and I was I was hooked. I loved it so much. I was just, and I was like, oh, the last thing I need is another expensive hobby I can't possibly afford, financially or time wise. But he pointed me in a bunch of directions, and there's very few women in general aviation or in the airlines. Something soon. I think the airlines have less than 1% or 1% of women, and general aviation also the percentage is very small compared to male pilots. So there's a lot of initiative to kind of involve women in aviation and give them an opportunity in terms of scholarships and things like that. So I was able to get 3 scholarships, one of them exclusively thanks to that song. And I enrolled in there's a theory associated with it that's called ground school. So I enrolled in the class in like very late fall, and then I started flying in early winter. And then when everything shut down, as I was kind of starting to fly. So I missed most of the spring, but then, things kind of started up slowly again. My instructor is a big aviation geek, so he knew how I felt, so he let me tag along with him in his personal airplane. And then things really kind of opened back up for us in summer, so I was able to train with the scholarship money without having to worry about financial investment. And that just it allowed me to see things from a different perspective, both literally and figuratively. It's beautiful from up high. All the petty concerns disappear, all the political divides are not there, and it's just vast and beautiful, and you wonder why we even bother investing energy in, stupid things when you can really just compost. You're sharing something that's so precious. And then just the concentration involved, like we were talking earlier, in flying the airplane and in monitoring all the controls. And it was amazing to be the way the training proceeds is you fly with the instructor until they deem you capable of going off on your own. So you fly your first solo, which is 3 takeoff and landings, which are the most challenging parts of flying to that point. And then eventually you start building up hours on your own in the airplane. So I went to Cape May by myself in the airplane. I went to Georgetown, Delaware for my kind of like long cross country flight. And it was just astounding. I still remember that feeling of just being in the airplane by myself. It's calm. Everybody's really polite on the radio. And it's just beautiful everywhere you look. And I love it.
Were you anxious at all during that time of learning or being by yourself up there? Is it just like being in the studio, you just continue to chop wood, carry water, and it
I was anxious coming up to this. Yeah, you are, but you know that you've put in the hours, you've put in the training. Your instructor wouldn't have let you go if they didn't feel that you were competent. And it's just like anything else, sure, there's some anxiety, but you just focus on the task at hand and you kind of ignore it. And then the better you get, the more you're able to enjoy just the wonder of it. To me, it's just, there's so much more to flight than just aerodynamics. It is so beautiful and so amazing, and that feeling is just overwhelmingly more intense than any kind of anxiety I may have had.
Yeah, you go for the light, right? It sounds as though it's this combination, like it as in a lot of artistic pursuits, and I think a lot of life, where there's this, as you say, intense, you described the intense focus that you need in order, because of all of what you need to pay attention to while you're up there, but at the same time being sort of a part of something much larger.
Yeah.
It's a sort of, is that the feeling? Is it a similar feeling that you have when you're sculpting? Or
I don't, to me, it's a slightly different kind of awe. And maybe because I'm so new to it and I still have to concentrate. I don't know how to, I've been asked that before. And it is, to me, it is a different way of using my hands. It's a different way of using my mind. It's not like foreign to me as a sculptor. I actually think that some of what helped my flying and to kind of get a hang of it reasonably quickly is the hand-eye coordination.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of like your awareness in the three-dimensional space, right? Because you're anticipating distances, you're anticipating kind of what the airplane is going to do, and it's a very three-dimensional object, so you're thinking of yourself in this plane and what it does and the aerodynamics of it in 3 dimensions. I don't know that it's the same feeling, because sculpture is really the creating that's the high for me. Here, this is something different. It's the challenge of learning. I'm still a very brand new pilot. I still have a lot to learn to arrive at any kind of excellence. Not that I haven't sculpture either. I guess you're always learning, no matter what you take on. But it definitely complements, and I just love it. I get up there and I have like a big grin.
Yeah, all your photos on your Facebook page, just that was just coming through, and it was really a joy to see that, sort of living vicariously through that, watching that journey happen. I guess I also want to know about your competitive skating, figure skating earlier in your life, because I'm thinking, well, how does the skating and sort of body in space and sort of navigating, the liftoff sometimes of being a figure skater. You started fairly early, right?
Yeah, I was really little. Like I told you, the parents were like, oh, the kid's getting sick a lot. Let's stick them out, in the cold, build up the immune system. A lot of Russian Olympians, Russian, Ukrainian, whatever, Soviet Olympians have started their careers in that same exact way. So it was really just for health reasons, and I loved it. I love it for similar reasons. I love sculpture and flying and music. It's moving your body in space. It's elegant, but it's rigorous. And if you watch skating, which you probably do, the 4-minute program is extremely taxing on the body. It's an extreme workout, but it looks effortless. So I think that's something else as well, because bronze sculpture is very laborious. But when you come see the show, it doesn't appear that way at all. But unless you're kind of in the studio putting in the hours and putting in the muscle, it's hard to imagine kind of what it really takes. And I think that same with skating, same with airplanes. You arrive at a point where you make something that's challenging and rigorous appear at least somewhat effortless, and that's very cool.
Why did you decide not to move ahead with it as a career with skating?
With skating? Well, I started early, but then I kind of took a long break because the ice skating rink closed back in my hometown of Odessa. So it really wasn't, I was too young to make that an option. And my parents didn't really kind of see that as an option, both for financial reasons, and they just always prioritized academics. And in Russia, taking up a sport seriously just requires a different kind of hierarchy of what's important. So that's part of it. So then when I got back to it, I was a lot older. I was like, 13, 14. And that's way late to learn, some of the complicated jumps and stuff like that. I do coach at several ice rinks in town. So I feel like in the end, I'm involved with it. I love it. I can share that love with my students, and I have both adults and kids. And I'm very proud of that. I love the sport. I support it in everywhere I can. So I feel very fortunate, even in spite of having that long break, to still be involved with it. It's kind of like true love is a big deal. That's one of those instances.
How do you possibly manage the schedule of all of it? Is it pretty structured, or do your weeks look, I guess that's an odd question given that what you just spoke to, which is during pandemic, everything, a lot of that was not available to you. But does your schedule, is it pretty consistent?
It is consistently jammed. Let's say that. I think it is something that I do try to kind of work on. I have a tendency to fill my plate up to the rim, and then I have a hard time swimming up from under it. So it's definitely something that I'm trying to manage better, is to kind of not have an overwhelming amount of things on my plate, because I do also need a breather and I can't always sleep 6 hours. So it's been a challenge to kind of balance things and also be able to give 100% in whatever I do. So sculpture takes up most of my time, and usually some of those other, and flying ended up kind of on par with it, given the circumstances. But I do then have to prioritize, and sculpture is definitely, it is my professional pursuit, it is my vocation, it is my primary passion, and it's also is my professional obligation, because I sculpt for myself. I also do craft work for myself, all the metal finishing and stuff like that. I also do craft work for other people, which helps me stay afloat financially. And then I'm involved in kind of various side things associated with the art, like blog writing for the gallery on occasion, things like that. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my primary occupation. And skating, usually I only coach on weekends or in the evenings, so it doesn't really interfere with my studio time. And same goes for playing music. So typically some of those side things don't interfere with my studio time. And when I was flying and when I was training, I did have to move things around and work on weekends, for example, things like
that. It's hearing about and seeing how much energy you bring and how much you clearly love all of these, all of what you found, the physical, the musical, just the artistic, and how they all seem to have a thread through them. It feels like they must give each other energy. Hearing you talk about it is exciting too. I want to make sure we get the, and I'm sure Bob will put it up there. I haven't looked over in the chat yet. Oh, there it is. Yep. The current exhibition at the Stannah Gallery. That was based on, that grew out of your flying?
It did. So it ended up, when, especially the shutdowns associated with the pandemic, and our entire fleet at the school got grounded, so we couldn't fly. And I was just seeing wings everywhere. So a lot of the sculptures just, and it's interesting, when I started flying, everything just kind of fits together. And I think that when it's genuine and it comes from the heart, I think in the back of your mind, you're always kind of thinking, I don't know how to explain it, but it's kind of like, you have a plan in the back of your mind and it's only partially articulated, but you feel it kind of in your heart. And then the universe tends to kind of, throw things your way that make it possible. Or I don't know if maybe you're just more aware of the opportunities, but I was working on the piece that's also in the show. It's a jackalope with a wing. So jackalope is a kind of North American mythical folk creature that's a half rabbit with antlers. And then I was like, wow, if you can have antlers, you might as well have wings. And then I was reading the Wright brothers book at the time that I highly recommend, by David McCullough. And wings are very challenging to sculpt, as it turned out. So I was able to go to the Academy of Natural Sciences here in Philadelphia and meet the group of ornithologists who welcomed me with open arms and set me up with a whole bunch of wings that I could study at my leisure in their kind of office space that looks out onto the fountain there in like Center City, Philadelphia. It's very beautiful. So I spent a lot of time just kind of like studying wings, and I was reading about Wright brothers, and they were looking at birds for the design of the wing of the airplane to understand the aerodynamics of it. So it was very cool. And I invested a lot of time in studying these wings. I have sketches upon sketches upon sketches of it that I then took in my studio and developed in clay. There's a very specific way that the feathers kind of fall and the bones are to allow for birds to become airborne. and without really kind of like getting into ornament, I just needed to understand the dynamics of it and the surface anatomy of it, but also then compose it in such a way that not only was it accurate, but it was aesthetically beautiful. So I worked a lot on this wing, and then I cast it in plaster and just had it kicking around the studio. And it just ended up kind of thematically embracing a lot of these pieces in the show. It kind of made its round. It became its own piece, just the wing. And I called it Fundamentals of Flight because of the simplicity of it. And certain angles, it's just a straight line, or not a straight line, it's actually a curve, but it's this kind of logarithmic aerodynamic curve. So yes, I think I was missing flying so much. I was seeing wings everywhere, and then it kind of all came together as a theme, in a way that was very organic for me.
And the show is up through the end of April
24th. Mm-hmm. April 24th, and it's called Fundamentals of Flight. And that's something too, because during the there comes another cat. During the pandemic, I still had to prepare for the written exam, for the pilot's written exam, which involves a whole bunch of thick books about everything from airplane controls to aerodynamics to airspaces to airport procedures to radio procedures. So it's a lot associated with it. It's very cool. And there's also a section on aeronautical decision making. And that has to do, it's very interesting. It's the psychology, it's a human psychology applied to flight by the Federal Aviation Administration. And mostly they do it, I think, in order to avoid accidents. So what they do is they study a lot of pitfalls of thinking, and you necessarily fall into one of those categories. Some people kind of make rash decisions. Some people are prone to just kind of throw their hands up and be like, I'm not in charge here. So they kind of isolate certain pitfalls in your mind that make you engage in a kind of a series of bad decisions that end up leading to an accident. And it doesn't have to be an aviation accident. It can be as simple as getting a flat tire while you're driving. So it's very applicable to kind of life. And I was like, everybody should take an aeronautical decision making class.
Yeah.
Because I got a flat in my truck while I was studying this, and the hilarious thing is that I hit every single pitfall.
Did you throw your hands up and start to walk away?
That was the only one that I
can't see you doing that.
I saw the tire was low. And I was like, the tire's low. And then, the number one is like, oh, it won't happen to me. And I was like, oh, it'll be fine. And then the second one was I had an appointment to get to. And I was like, if I go there and put the air in and do this and do that, I'm going to be late. So that's the get there-itis. Right, you go anyway.
The get there-itis is what it's called.
The rush, yeah.
Like, forget about this, I got to get to work.
Yeah, you gotta get right. Not realizing that if you get
you might not get there.
Really late to my thing. So there's that. And the only thing is, I did kind of mitigate. I was like, well, I do have a spare in my bed. I do have a whole bunch of AAA calls. So should I get the flat, I do have a solution. So at least, I didn't throw my hands up and go, whatever, I'm not in charge. But right. So that was really applicable to real life. And a lot of those situations, they kind of play, you end up watching a lot of accidents also with general aviation, because it's single engine airplane. So if you lose an engine, you have some problems. So you don't want to end up in that situation. You don't want to end up not having solutions for what might happen. And then also you don't want to make a decision that would be very silly in retrospect. So you end up going through a lot of that. And watching the videos and listening to the radio communications of people involved in some of those things. And it's like, wow, like, yeah, this is applicable not just to airplanes, this is applicable across the board. And then I was thinking about just the aerodynamics, right? So you have the lift and thrust that overcomes the gravity, the weight and drag in order to propel you forward. And that's very much life on a daily basis. It's kind of like you have that balancing act between lift and
gravity
and
drag,
lift and weight, and then you also have the propelling yourself forward and whatever holds you back. So that was very relevant to me as well in things that were kind of happening, is constantly trying to like look up and trying to overcome those things that were holding me back, professionally or personally or whatever. So a lot of it seemed applicable. I was like, wow, I can talk about this in my art, and I think I am already. So that's kind of how that show evolved and ended up being called Fundamentals of Flight in the end, because those are the fundamental forces of flight and the fundamental principles. And without making it like too obvious, they do translate into everyday life really well, I thought. And that kind of, the show was already coming together on its own in a way, and I think that unified it thematically, for me at least.
It sounds like a lot of, like you said, a lot of things came together in time and space and during the pandemic to sort of move you ahead. What else do you have on your plate that you're looking forward to?
Wow. Well, I guess I'm excited about the show. I'm really grateful to have it up. I think I'm still unburying myself from the amount of work that piled up while I was focused on exclusively that. Because coming up to a show, I was really in the studio for 12 hours, if not 14 hours a day, every day. And I really had to put everything else on the side burner. There was no room for anything. So now I'm beginning to kind of catch up, still catching up with some of the work, catching up with some of the both work for my clients in my studio, my own work. And well, I was looking forward to going to Europe. I don't know when that's going to happen, but hopefully soon, partially because I have some unfinished business, partially because I do want to take a break and also visit with family I haven't seen in a long time. So that's something I'm looking forward to. For sure, I have other ideas for creating new works in clay, and also for enlarging some of the works that are in the show, developing them bigger. And one of them is that gathering piece of stacked animals. And for that, I know I'm going to be making a lot of trips to the zoo and like animal sanctuaries to sketch and draw. So I'm looking forward to those two projects. I am looking forward to continuing to work on being a competent pilot. So I have had a couple of flights in a larger airplane, a 4-seater rather than a 2-seater. And I'm looking forward to the next rating that I'm going to be working towards. Very excited about that. So yeah, there's quite a few things going on like that I'm looking forward to, for sure. I'm going to be teaching at Flash Art Memorial figure modeling class. That's the first for me here in the US.
You're teaching it?
Yeah, I'm teaching it. I'm teaching a figure and a kind of a structural, anatomical, academic, if you will, approach to the figure. And so I'm very excited. I taught that class once in Paris, so it's going to be neat to teach it here for the first time. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to the global situation improving, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you at Fleischer, you'll be in the neighborhood, so I would love to catch up with you and just see where all of these many different and divergent but yet similar passions that you have, take flight. Yeah, it's you've been an audience member of the IRC for so long, and I've followed your the flying, and I guess I didn't know that you were a skater, but I'm so delighted that you took the time to join us on the show today, and I hope people will go out and check your work out at the Stannah Gallery through the end of April. And just best of luck to you with everything that you have on your plate creatively and in your life.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a real honor. I love the productions. I'm looking forward. That's another thing I'm looking forward to is live theater again. Yeah. I have always enjoyed Idiopathic. Leipzig Consortium, and I'm the #1 fan. I'll be there in the front row the minute things.
Well, I'm coming into your skating class too. That's the other thing. I've now found a reason to pick up my ice skates again after so many years. So you'll see me there, definitely.
There you go. We'll have to do it sometime. Very cool.
Well, Julia, thank you so much and best of luck to you in everything.
Thank you so much for
Everything.
having me.
You're welcome. Thanks to all of you for being here this week and for sticking with us and just being there. We're going to be talking with Dan Scully next week on whatever next week is. Yeah, April the 17th. Dan he's a film critic. He's a writer. He was in stand-up comedy for over a decade, and he's now turning his energies towards filmmaking and directing. And he is a film critic for a number of different publications in Philadelphia, including Findy and a number of others. So we're going to talk about his work on a horror anthology that he's working on as a director that is going to be shot here in Philadelphia and coming out in 2021. So that's happening next week, the 17th of April. I hope you'll be there. And in the week ahead, just wishing you very safe journeys. Hope you've gotten your vaccine and just keep creating. And thanks so much for being there and supporting our foray into the creative arts. Until we see you again, take care.